Hello, everyone, and welcome to our session. My name is Delynn Armstrong-Williams, and I'm the chair of the Political Science and International Affairs Department. And I'm so glad that so many of you join us today. And I'm glad to see so many of you here in person, and those of you who are joining us on Zoom. Hello and welcome as well on all of our other campuses. So, as you know, this is the 150th anniversary of the University of North Georgia. Hopefully you've seen signs, right? So because it's the 150th anniversary, we were trying to figure out as a department what we could do to link you guys, which is really the future of the department, with the people who came before you. And so this was a brainchild of the department. I thank everybody who helped me work on this. And today what you're going to be hearing is you're going to be hearing from alumni to help you see possible future career paths moving forward, what these people did with the education they received at the University of North Georgia, and how they were able to take political science and all the training they had and just move on in their careers. So our hope is by providing you with these insights from your predecessors and their individual career paths, you will be a stronger job candidate and hopefully a better problem solver, and you also are going to be able to go farther in your career. So I know you're not here to listen to me, and you're here to listen to them. So what I'm going to do is introduce our first speaker today. Our first speaker is Mr. Richard Stancil. He graduated in 1978 with his BS in political science. He is currently the CEO of RayZyn Company in Hiawassee, Georgia. Mr. Stancil had a long and illustrious career as an attorney. He had several positions in the office of the governor of Georgia, and most recently, he served as Hiawassee city manager. His extensive and varied experience, both in public as well as the private sector, is a great way to get us started. So, Mr. Stancil.
Thank you all very much. We have podium. I just want to say, you said it. If I'm soft-spoken, except in a courtroom. If any of you in the back cannot hear me, just give a thumbs up. That either means I'm doing well or can't hear me. That works fine.
Do you want a mic?
Don't really,
Okay.
unless needed.
Okay.
Contrary, this is the 150th anniversary. Contrary to popular opinion, I was not here for the entire 150 years, but I am probably the oldest panel member. I think I beat the Colonel out by a few years, but we share both similar experiences in professors, in the environment and in the stories we sometimes tell. So I always preface any type of remarks. This is the way I remember it. Okay. The wonderful thing about North Georgia is that it will and always will be a focus of what little success I've accomplished. That's both with the quality of education that I've received here. Over the years, I've been to other schools, I've taken on other roles, and I've never felt intimidated by my lack of knowledge. When I say I got a BS at North Georgia, I got a BS at North Georgia. I can BS with any of them. That's important. But also equally important, I think, is the people I met here, not just the professors, but my fellow students. To this day, ever since we graduated, at least 4 of us meet every year. We either play golf, we go to dinner, both, have a few libations. Since I work for a wine company, they don't see the RayZyn part. They expect me to bring the wine, which I do. The bottom line is whatever you can get anywhere you can get at North Georgia College. The quality of the education is solely dependent upon the effort and what you put into it. Now, I've had the fortune after graduating, I worked on a master's at the University of Georgia with the idea of perhaps I might go into public administration. I had done an internship at North Georgia College. I worked for the House Appropriations Committee. They're the ones with the money. They're the ones with the decision making. I got marked down one time by one of my professors over a disagreement because I wanted to focus on appropriations, the Appropriations Act, and follow the money. I thought that was 90% of the work of the General Assembly. He would point out, well, they also pass laws. They do other things. And I said, laws are pretty much meaningless if you don't have the money to back it up. So I will always be a proponent of the appropriation system in the state of Georgia and the good use of the public dollars. I also oppose any tax increases, but that's because of the people I worked with. When I did the internship, I worked with Joe Frank Harris, who had been the chairman for 18 years. Joe Frank went on to become the governor of the state of Georgia. And I was fortunate enough, having interned with him, having worked with him over the summers in preparation of the gubernatorial run, I was able to stay on for 8 years in the administration, working with the governor. Started off as, a fair employment compliance officer, which lasted, I think, about 3 months. The governor brought me across the street to work on an initiative that he had underway. And basically, we did a revision of the CETA program at the time. He fired 300 workers and hired 3. That's the way he thought. But we put together an innovative program to contract out for services, and he won a national award for that. Wasn't anything we thought of in advance. It's just what we had to do in the heat of the moment to get something done. Without the experience of North Georgia, the knowledge of North Georgia, the confidence I think I gained in North Georgia, I'm not too sure I would have been kind of able to head that up fresh out of college. But we made it work. I stayed 8 years, worked as executive assistant. He would dole out special projects. As executive assistant, he also wanted to give me some administrative experience. So I worked with the Children's Trust Fund, the Georgia Commission on Children and Youth, the Child Abuse Prevention, I think I mentioned, and child support guidelines, which are real big, with Judge Weltner of the Supreme Court at that time. All those things were important because I learned to utilize the skills, the knowledge, and put it towards a positive result. Thereafter, I decided I wanted to get away from government, get away from Atlanta. See, that's my first warning. Came to the mountains, and started practicing law, which is another set of stories all within itself. I'm now CEO and legal officer for a national company. And I found out that making chocolate covered wine grapes is much harder than trying murder cases. And it's about as vicious. Thank y'all. If there's any questions you have afterwards, I'd be glad to, address it, but it's a good place to be. Do what you can, make the best of it.
And as Mr. Stancil mentioned, we will have a lot of time, hopefully, for questions at the end, so you can ask esteemed alumni a lot of questions. So our second speaker is retired Army Colonel Pete Hoffman, political science class of 1981. Colonel Hoffman brings a very different background to our panel. Recently, he was named one of several civilian aides to the Secretary of the Army for Coastal Georgia, and he is also officer co-chair of Fort Stewart Retired Soldier Council and serves on the Chief of Staff of the Army's Retired Soldier Council. Until recently, he was Vice President for Student Affairs at Savannah Technical College and has had stints at both Georgia Southern and Armstrong State Universities. Prior to his career in academia, he spent over 30 years in the U.S. Army, where he held command and staff positions at a variety of levels, and also served as a defense attaché in U.S. embassies in Moscow, Sofia, and Abuja.
Oh, sure. I tell you, it's hard to follow the record. That's great, but I will emphasize this point that I am not the oldest. That's good. Like I said, class of 81. So the question was, how did my time here at the university at North Georgia prepare me and lead me to my career? And I think that the better question is, did my time at North Georgia help me in my career? Did it advance me and toward my future career? The answer to that is very different right now than it would have been when I first graduated. When I first graduated, if somebody asked me that, I would have said, yeah, I think that the cadet program and the military program here at North Georgia prepared me well to be a lieutenant. I felt like I was ready to go do, leadership at that level. I was all in, the Army things, tanks and guns, and but I would not have mentioned my degree at that point. And it's not because it wasn't a good program. It's a great program. We had Mr. John Shomar was here at the time. A lot of people knew his family was from Hungary, and he focused on Eastern European and Soviet international relations. Learned a lot from him. It was a great program. But at the time, that even though I enjoyed it and I didn't understand the relevance quite. I was focused on being a soldier. That's what I was going to be. And I did. Came in the Army. My first assignment, though, I found myself on the front line of the Cold War. Here I was patrolling the border of East and West Germany, with the Soviet hordes, the 8th Guards Army on the other side, ready to come across. And then my next assignment was with a 8-inch nuclear capable artillery unit, where we trained and were ready to pop a nuclear round if those Soviet forces did ever come across. People forget how tense that time really was. It was real. And we really had that capability. And I did that for 3 years in Germany. Then I went to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, where got to jump out of airplanes and served with the 82nd. I did that several times, and they paid me to do that. Can you believe it? It was so much fun. But then one day when I was a senior captain, I got the call and said, you got to do a functional area. You can't just be a soldier with troops. You got to do a functional area in the Army. We want you to be a foreign area officer in Eastern European and Russian. Well, I had no idea what that was, but it sounded pretty neat. And I went up to Washington and I asked him, I said, well, I want to do this, but I really like, being with soldiers. I really like artillery. He said, don't worry about it. Very few people actually go to Russia or the Soviet Union. This was a Cold War, right? So I said, okay, I'll do it. So they sent me to training, and I got my language training. I got my graduate degree at Cornell, and then they sent me some other training. And then as soon as that was done, my next assignment, I became involved in arms control. There was the INF treaty, Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty was signed. It was the first treaty ever. It was historic, first treaty ever that actually got rid of a whole class of nuclear weapons, the intermediate range. And so my job was to be in country and inspect and monitor the Russians and make sure the Soviets at that time and the Russians later to make sure that they were following the treaty. So here I was climbing over a ICBM, Russian ICBMs out in Ural Mountains. Think about that. 10 years before, I'd been standing at the border waiting for them, and now I'm climbing around their missiles, making sure that they're in compliance. It was a great time. I did that. Then I served at the embassy in Kiev at the time, because we were working with the Ukrainians under the cooperative threat reduction agreements to help them get rid of their nuclear weapons. They had signed an agreement, the Budapest Agreement, where they agreed to get rid of their nuclear capabilities because the Russians agreed that they would never use military force against them. Think about that. But anyway, I was there working at the embassy, helping them get rid of that. It was a great time. Then I went back to the Army once again, got to jump out of airplanes, do fun things, and they continued to pay me. As I got more senior, I got to serve at several embassies. As you heard, I served in Moscow. That was at a time in the late 90s when we started seeing our relationship with Russia really starting to go down. It was a very intense time. Then I served in Sofia, Bulgaria, where the Bulgarians, along with a lot of Eastern European countries, were fighting to get into NATO, working hard. That was a great assignment. I served at NATO headquarters, working with NATO as it was going through the expansion process and trying to control the problems that we had in Kosovo. So another great assignment in the international realm. And then because of all the time I had spent in Eastern Europe and Russia, and because of my language skills with Russian, the Army sent me to Nigeria. The Army personnel system is great, but that was a great time too, because it was as Boko Haram was raising their head up in the north, and we were starting to see a lot of terrorist activities. The lesson there is it's great to focus on an area, but remember the rest of the world, because you never know where you're going to end up. So at any rate, I did that. I ended up my career back in the 3rd Infantry Division, back down in the Savannah area. I got out. I worked with Georgia Southern University as their government relations rep, and then as their vice president of college. Now working for the government once again as the civilian aide to the Secretary of the Army. I tell you all this because if you ask me now, did this university prepare me? I would still mention the military program. It really did help me a lot. But I would also mention my political science degree, because it did lay the foundation for a lot of things I got to do in the realm of international affairs. So, thank you.
Really really thank everybody because you're staying on time. So I know you're not real academics. Just kidding. But the other thing I want to tell you is I am the new John Shomar.
Oh, boy.
So when I came to the university, everyone said, "Oh, are you the new John Shomar?" And I went, "What?" At the time when this happened, the university was very small. We only had 4 total political scientists, and I replaced John Shomar in his line. So I'm sure he was a wonderful guy. So third up is the Honorable Judge Ben Miller. After receiving his BS in political science in 1992, he earned his law degree from John Marshall Law. He spent the next 13 years in private practice and then transitioned into the public side of the legal profession, serving primarily in Fayette County. And 2 years ago, Governor Kemp named Judge Miller to the Superior Court Judge of the Griffin Judicial Circuit, which serves Fayette, Spalding, Pike, and Upson counties. So thank you. Next.
I'll make sure it's on offer silent position. If it goes off during these proceedings, I will be continued. Thank you so much. I appreciate the invitation and the ability to come up here. One thing parents do is parents knock out the light bill and we take care of the mortgage and we embarrass our children. I have 2 wonderful children, one of which works at Disney World, college graduate. The other which is in the back corner back here. That's my son Knox Miller, and he's going to drive some of us to lunch, I think. And so North Georgia is so near and dear to my heart, but it's a decision that I did not make myself. At the time when I was coming out of high school, my older 4 sisters were either graduated or at the University of Georgia, and that's where I plan to go. And this is all the days before Hope Scholarship. And I happened to get a marksmanship scholarship to the University of North Georgia, which was North Georgia College at the time. And so my father said, "Oh, Junior, you'll love it. It's nice and mountainous up there." And so I came to North Georgia against my will, but it's one of the best decisions that's ever made. And when I started at North Georgia, I thought, well, what type of major should I focus on? And I wound up in a political science major, not really knowing what it was. Well, what is a political science major? It's a major that teaches you how to analytically think and how to do research and how to write. In essence, how to communicate effectively. And it also tells you and teaches you about government. And in this day and time, I really am wondering about the civics classes in high school. I don't think they fully prepare students to understand how government works and how relationships work and the ability to disagree in an agreeable manner. Is a huge asset to any job that you have. Now, a lot of people says, well, political science, you're going to go into law enforcement or go into politics or the law, and which that's the logical response to that. But the skills you learn in the political science department are across the board useful in industry. It's useful in any job that you have because it has to do with how you deal with people and how you can analyze fact patterns and analyze problems, which every job that you'll ever have will have that asset. Not to mention the ability to interact with others and the friendships and relationships that you have. Now, how did I get to the job that I have? I truly attribute it not to my intelligence whatsoever. It is the relationships I have made throughout the years that I worked in the private practice of law. One of the greatest accomplishments that I feel that I received when I was in private practice is when I was representing Thomaston Mills at the time. I live in Thomaston in Upson County. And at the time, the textile mills were big, and I was arguing a case about a forklift. And the long story short is, after I won the case, everything went well. The forklift company called me the next week and wanted me to hire me to represent them. And so I just beat this guy to $30,000, and now he wants me to represent him. And so it's because I feel that I could interrelate with people, take a fact pattern, argue the law without being disagreeable. And you can do the exact same thing with the skills that you learn in the science department, be it in an industrial setting or in a marketing setting and things such as that. And that's why I really think that the skills that you learn in political science is invaluable in any job that you decide to go into. Now, how did I become a judge? I really attribute that to working hard, showing up on time, and being prepared. And even when you could be a rear end to somebody, don't be, because you never know when you're going to run into those folks again, because it happens. You will run into them again, and they will remember if you are disagreeable without a reason. And but now that's not to say that you're not supposed to stick to your guns on issues, but you can do it in a in an agreeable fashion. There are lots of fun that I have. My job has to do with anything from adoption to murder trials. And so it is fascinating watching the dynamics of juries and how they interact. It's fascinating watching good lawyers who are prepared argue good cases and cross-examine and direct question witnesses. And I've got a great job, and I can't believe they pay me to do this. It's much fun to do. But I really think I got here just through hard work and the relationships that I have built. You don't know the relationships right now where those people are going to go. And when the time comes, sometimes they'll remember how you are and how you act and how you work. And that will follow you throughout your career and throughout everything that you do. And so every little decision you make will turn your life in a small incremental manner. So try to make a pattern of good decisions. If you have some bad ones, or there are times you make poor decisions unknowingly, but every decision that you have does point your life in a different direction. And if you try to maintain good decisions, then the outcome's going to be good. Now, did I plan on being a judge? No, I did not, but it just worked out that way. And I'm glad I've got the opportunity to influence people and change lives. It's a blessing to be able to do it. I can't wait to listen to some questions that you may have, but that's a little bit of snapshot of the life story of Ben Miller Jr. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much. So our next panelist is the first of our two MPA graduates that are joining us today. And this is Beverly Hardin, who earned her Master's in Public Policy degree with us in 1999. Ms. Hardin has had more than 20 years of leadership experience in organizational development, nonprofit management, fund development, and legislative advocacy. She serves currently as the CEO of the Carolina Youth Development Center, a multi-service child welfare and social services organization in South Carolina. Prior to joining the CYDC, Hardin served as the Executive Director of Communities and Schools of Durham and the Director of Community Outreach for the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill Nutrition Research Institute, and Director of Government Affairs and Community Development at Eckerd Youth Alternatives. So thank you so much.
You go all the places. You have a lot of experiences, and it's really cool because most of you are just on the very beginning of this journey. I'm honored to be here. I'm honored to be the only female on this panel. 5 years from now, ladies, you have a responsibility to step up. So there's my first challenge for you. I remember when I entered the MPA program, I probably thought I was going to head to law school at some point in time. I had an internship in undergraduate work working at a courthouse. I discovered that law was not everything you see on TV, and I wanted to do something different. And I started the MPA program wanting something different, but not knowing what that might be. And then I had this great professor. Some of you might remember Barry Friedman. And Dr. Friedman used to rail on the nonprofit sector. I mean, he would rail on it. He's made a whole career about writing about corruption in the nonprofit sector. So I decided I wanted to go into the nonprofit sector. Dr. Friedman would really appreciate that. But you know, it made me aware of a whole industry that I didn't know much about. And I started looking at nonprofit jobs, and I started reading ads, and I took them more seriously because it was, at the time, it was the fastest growing sector in the American economy. So there are opportunities there. I started looking around at what nonprofits were doing, and there were some organizations with some really cool missions, and they were changing the world. And I thought, well, I want to do something impactful, and I'd like to go change the world. I did not go to any of the organizations that Dr. Friedman warned us about. But I did go to work shortly after finishing my degree for an organization where I was the second executive director of a little fledgling organization. It was a two-man shop, Friends of Georgia State Parks and Historic Sites. The first executive director worked for 3 days and quit. Wow. He basically said, it's too hard to build something new. And I was maybe too foolish to heed his warning. And so I said, oh, I can do this. This is going to be great. And I did. I built a network, a statewide network to support the state parks that still exists today, which I'm really proud of. They paid no money, but I had a big title, right? And I was in charge of something, and that felt important to me, and I could make something matter, and that felt important to me. And the most important lesson that I learned there, my board chair was an architect. He didn't really know anything about fundraising. I didn't really know anything about fundraising. I didn't really know anything about protecting the state parks, but I knew I had this charge and I was in it and I was going to do it. And he'd say, I think Georgia Power has money. We should call them. And at the time, I literally, this was back in 1999, y'all, I got out the phone book and I said, oh, he's the president. Let's call him. And sometimes he would answer the phone and take the call. and that today is still the most important life lesson. Pick the phone, make the call, do the work, roll up your sleeves. It's just that simple, right? Everybody thinks it's so hard to go give the $1 million gift or to go climb the mountain, but really it starts with one step in front of the other, right? And you can climb the mountain. And all of a sudden, I've built a career where now I have 63 employees reported to me. Small in the grand scheme of the military world, but we're a $4.5–5 million a year organization. We had a speaker come in from New York last week. I testify in front of our state legislature on an annual basis. Get to take an annual trip to Washington to speak about child welfare and children's rights there. Have worked with Homeland Security on trafficking issues because teens face all kinds of issues. And none of those things were really in my game plan, but they evolved over time. I learned expertise in my field. I learned how to manage every aspect of the nonprofit industry, everything from infrastructure and programming to digging into specific industry groups. Take what you were interested in and own it, make it yours, right? When you go to the job interview doesn't end when you get the offer letter. I told a couple of my colleagues, I actually believe that's where the interview begins. Every place that I've been, it's taken me about 2 years to really understand the industry, really understand the dynamics of the role, and then figure out how I'm going to make an impact, right? So I consider the first 2 years in any role my interview. What can I do here, right? Learn it, figure it out, own it, and then figure out how you're going to impact it. Because at the end of the day, if you can't leave an impact behind, you might have wasted an opportunity. And every place that you've been prepares you for the next place that you're in. I did write down a couple of things that I wanted to share with you. These are not my words, but I thought that they were really good advice. My husband's a football coach, so he's a great motivator, and he's always looking to pull down some words of wisdom. This is something called the 4 Agreements, and it's from a guy named Don Miguel Ruiz. And the 4 agreements are, number 1, be impeccable with your words. Once they come out of your mouth, you can't put them back, right? So be impeccable with your words. Don't take anything personally. The judge spoke about this. I had an internship at the state capitol for a little while, and my boss was a lobbyist at the time and had done quite a bit of lobbying work over the years since in different roles and capacities. And one thing that he told me that stuck with me all these years is your worst enemy in one room may be your only friend in the next. So don't take anything personally. Don't make assumptions. And I hear all the time people say, well, I thought, or I think, or I feel. Go find out the truth, right? Don't make assumptions. And then always do your best. And I think that if you walk in saying, I'm going to make something special out of myself, and I'm going to make this matter to the world or to my career, invest in yourself. Invest in yourself. Set yourself apart. Take time to own your role and always do your best. I will say, there's one other tip that comes to mind that I think is important to share with folks who are trying to make their charge. And, always think about who you're competing against. When you're thinking about a role or building a career, who are you competing against? So in the nonprofit sector, Dr. Friedman told us over and over again, there are all these organizations that failed. They close as fast as they open. They don't have sustainability. They don't have transparency. They are lacking in infrastructure. So that question stuck with me all these years later, 20 some odd years later, too many years. But I learned at the time, if I want to be a leader in the nonprofit sector, I need to figure out how to set myself apart and bring something different to the table. Because I didn't want to be another story that you use in class, right? And so I started becoming an expert in operating systems. And when I walk into a job interview and they say, what can you do for Carolina Youth Development Center? I can build a framework so we're not just nice people doing nice things. We're intentional people doing intentional work, right? And none of my colleagues were talking about frameworks, organizational frameworks in the nonprofit sector. That was a place where I've really been able to set myself apart in building a career. And my advice to you is to look at what you love to study, what do you love to learn, and be a lifelong learner. My husband pulled this phrase off of a painting that Michelangelo did. On the back of it, he simply wrote in his 90s, this is one of his last words, "Ancora impara," never stop learning. And whether you are learning for yourself, whether you're learning for a job, invest in your future and let yourself become experts in the things you love, because those things will play out in life for you. So that's all I have to share today.
Speaker is current Gainesville City Manager, Mr. Brian Lackey. He is another MPA grad. He earned his degree in 2005 with us. He has spent the majority of his career in various positions within Gwinnett County government, rising from a division director of stormwater management to the director of planning and development. And he made the jump to Hall County and moved into his city manager position in 2015.
Thank you, Dr. Lewis. Appreciate the chance to be here today. This is quite the panel to be a part of today. But I will have to stress to you that even though I work for the government, it was not my boyhood dream to grow up and be a bureaucrat. Right? And so I got my engineering degree way back in 95. And I planned to go get some experience in the private sector, and I was going to just take over the world and have my own engineering firm someday. And in fact, when I graduated, I turned down an engineering job with the state of Georgia that paid more than a private sector job. So that's the direction I wanted to go. So I took that job and became a field engineer for a local geotech engineering firm in Atlanta. And my first project was on a project that you've all seen before. So as you're going into Atlanta on 85, the two high-rise dorms right there at Georgia Tech. So I'm going to date myself a little bit, but my panel probably knows that was built to be the Olympic dorms for 96. So now it's Georgia Tech was there. So I was the field engineer, and those of you who I bring that up may remember some news articles about the sinking of the project. So as the junior field engineer, I was on site the day the TV crew showed up. So after I went and hid in the broom closet, they left, literally in the broom closet. Once they left, I came out and said, I've got to find another plan because there were other issues with this company. I said, I'm the low man on the totem pole. They're going to fire me pretty soon. So I started looking for just other jobs to have and pursue a few, but there was this job with the Gwinnett County Water Department. Took it, just said, hey, I got to have a landing spot before I get fired. I took it and said, hey, I'll just do this government gig for just a few months. I'll get back on track, going to the private sector. But they just kept promoting, giving me promotions and giving me more money, more responsibility. Then about 5 years in, my wife kind of sat me down. She said, look, we need to decide something. My family's always been big on education and getting your master's degree. She was as well. And she said, you need to make a decision. If you're going to stick with a government gig, you need to go pursue your MPA, or you need to go ahead and cut loose and go back to the private sector and get your MBA. So I checked out a few programs and decided to go to North Georgia and go that route. And I think it took me like 10 years to get out because I did it at night and had some kids and all that. So it seemingly took me forever to get out of it. But right after I finished, I got a call. I had not applied for this job. So in the Gwinnett County Planning Division, which was separate than the Water Department, they had a deputy director position open. And the director called me and he said, hey, I see you just finished your MPA program. He said, I got to find a deputy. They had some other plans for him to move up. He said, I got to find somebody to take my place. I want somebody from outside the department. I see you just finished your MPA. That's the type of person I'm looking for. So that door got open for me that I don't think I would ever go through had that not happened. So eventually I got promoted. He moved on to something else. I did 8 years in that planning department. There was zoning, building permits, all that type stuff. And then I realized, hey, I think I want to move on up into some management, either city or county management. Started looking for the right position, applied for Gainesville, at the right place at the right time. And I remember sitting on my interview and the mayor said, hey, we see you got your MPA. That's impressive to us. You got your experience. So getting my MPA at North Georgia really opened doors for me that it never would have before because of that. And here I am today. So I highly recommend going into local government. I know a lot of you are talking about to graduate or look at what you do. It's really, the term is where the rubber hits the road. You're dealing with people and services that impact their lives every day. We call them Gainesville. We're a full service city. We touch on just about everything in your life from all that. There's never a dull moment. If you like to take on different challenges day after day, local government is the place, because there's opportunities and challenges that rise up every single day through that. Sometimes I call it putting out fires. Sometimes I call it spinning plates through all that. That's what we do. And if you think it's a challenge dealing with your one boss, try taking on 6 or 7. dealing with that and navigating through all that. So again, to answer the question, yeah, my MPA degree really just opened those doors. It really made some opportunities happen for me. So again, thank you for that.
But certainly not least is Mr. Jason Barnaby, our youngest panelist. Jason finished his political science degree in 2007, following his time as a U.S. Army MP. After he received his degree, he began his career working in electoral politics for the Political Action Committee, and he is currently the Director of Campaign Success at Change.org, the world's largest online social change program.
Thank you for having me. When I was here, I was the worst student. Just start off with that. I was in Dr. Armstrong's very first class when she started here, and I thought I'm going to come to school. I'm going to become a senator. And what? As soon as I turned 35, I had dreams. I had a very specific plan, and as you can see by my name tag, I am not Senator Barnaby. And I think one of the themes you hear on the panel is nobody here's life went according to plan, including coming here. I did not want to go to this school. My dad got stationed here. I lived in Germany for 10 years. I lived around the world. I did not want to go to college in a place called Dahlonega or Dahlonega when I first got here. This was not where my dreams were going to come true. And then I learned like, nope, they weren't. But what was in store for me was what was meant to be, and it has to do with opportunity and taking that opportunity. Another theme that you've heard here today. And what I learned from North Georgia is that this is a place where you are getting a world-class education. I have worked with people that went to Harvard, to Yale, and you've all heard of imposter syndrome. For a minute there, you have it, and then you quickly learn, like, I have the same education that they do. I've learned around the same theory, I've read the same textbooks, I've read the same literature. But I had something different than they did. I had access to some amazing professors, 3 of them here in the room, in a way that you wouldn't have at Harvard, that you wouldn't have at Yale. And I got it at a much better price. Also, a reason I was a horrible student is because I don't think I really understood what I was learning. So you also heard that one of the best things about this degree is that often you're going to be in a space in a room with people who are trying to make a decision. And they want people in that room that can look at the same set of facts, understand the systems, the resources, what's at play, and be able to concisely convey those ideas and make a recommendation on the decision. And I look to those people every day. People look to me to do that. And it came from all those papers that sometimes I procrastinated on, but really thinking about those ideas, thinking about the literature I was reading, and coming forth with my own set of ideas in ways to move that forward when I was thinking about some ideas that were learned in class. So I really encourage you all, do not procrastinate. Try to spend time building those skills, because no matter where you go in the workforce, those are some of the most valuable people that you can turn to and say, what do you think? And this degree gets you. The other thing I would say is it's always great if you can love what you do. Great. But it's also good if you can find something you're great at, that you're passionate about. I never thought like one day I would do revenue for North America for a tech company in the social change space. I had no idea how to do that, but the opportunity came in my company and I put my hand in. Nobody else did, and I took that opportunity, and it led to the next opportunity that I was even more passionate about. So find those spaces where they need somebody and step into them and do hard work. The other thing about the planning is I think you all as a generation have more information than anybody's ever had. And that can sometimes be overwhelming. One minute you might be like, I want to do social change in the tech space, maybe I want to do this politics. It's really hard to decide what should I spend the rest of my life doing. One, you don't have to decide. Just find something, focus on it, get great at it. And 2, take the opportunities. 3, again, where are you needed? I would really focus on that. I worked on electoral politics, and I just want to give a plug for that. Dr. Armstrong didn't mention I worked for Obama, probably because she thought you wouldn't listen to me anymore. Apologize. No, but that was another thing here is that North Georgia did give me a space to respectfully disagree with a lot of people. My dad being one of them, he works for the governor now, and we give each other a hard time, but we do it respectfully. We have a lot of great conversations. And I got that here, where I might have not gotten at another institution where I really could have put myself in a bubble with other progressives or people that were like-minded. So get out of your bubble, see the world, find people that don't have the same lived experience because you're going to get in the room with those people again. As was mentioned, there's one woman on the panel. For every one male graduate, there's 2 female graduates. So guess what? Your boss is probably going to be a woman. Your team is probably going to be female. So if you are not in spaces where you're encountering different lived experiences, you're not setting yourself up for success. And I really think that's really important. But when you get to electoral politics, I would say I got in the door because I volunteered for the presidential races. If you go in early, you have a lot of early access to a lot of people that can help you raise through ranks. Eventually, I was in the Obama White House, picking the first White House interns. It was because it's what I knew on the campaign. Then I met another person who I met on the campaign, got another job. So that's the last thing I'll say is you need to make those connections and you need to network. At one time, I was afraid of feeling like I was using people. Like, I don't want to call them. They're going to just think I want a job. Yes, I do want a job, and they're doing it. And someone else is going to do it. So keep those connections, talk to people, and if you see something you want, find out who you know, reach out to them. And I think it's a really useful thing to do. I know it's almost lunch, so I'm going to let it get to Q&A, the same thing, but thank you for having me.
So I do hope that you will ask this panel, who's honestly, thank you so much. It's been absolutely awesome. So ask you questions. And so you can ask them questions about their life path, their career, how they've progressed. They have had amazing experiences. And I think what is so incredible is you guys who are here today at the University of North Georgia, the opportunities you have are tenfold what they were able to tap into. And it's because the university's grown, there's so many more things, you can start earlier. And so understand what you're hearing over and over again is take that chance, make that call, be in the room, okay? Put yourself in for these opportunities. It is so vitally important that you do that because a huge part of success is showing up. And when we have all of these opportunities for Georgia legislative internship programs and a variety of things internationally and cooperating with New Zealand and all of these other things, I can tell you we have 800 majors and I might get 4 applications. Show up. Okay, so that's the one thing I really want you to hear from this group and what they're saying. So now I'm going to open it up for questions. Does anybody have a question for our panel? Yes.
All right, so I've been going through the job application process, and something that's sort of worrying to me is like how much my new job is expecting me to like know up front versus how much they're going to be teaching me, because the requirements on the applications are like a lot. So how much did they teach you on the job, and how much were you expected to know up front?
Anyone?
Well, I will say this first, as you said, that's so much different today than it was for us. I'll do a quick plug, Gainesville.org. If you'll show up, then we'll take you. I always joke with our new employees, you came back for the second day. Thank you for being here.
No, and my only comment is, as an employer, number one, I don't assume school teaches you anything. That's my job. I want somebody who's successful in school because I know I can take that mind, I can work with you, I can develop you, and you will move forward.
I was going to say in the last year, I've hired about 30 people, and that's exactly right. I'm looking for somebody that will have the skills and the foundation, and then I want to be able to work with a team of people to shape them to know the ins and outs of what we're working on. Obviously, if you're like a lawyer or a judge, there's certain differences when you're getting hired there, but I would also like, depending on the job, like also they use algorithms. So don't use the same resume for every single job. I often like will think about the keywords and then also just go back and look at the company itself and see like what do they have online, what do they talk about, because again, specifically I'm happy to talk to you about that particular job, but then you speak to what you see what they have published.
I have one other comment that I would just encourage you to think about. When you're looking at applications, don't just assume that submitting an electronic resume is the only way to apply. And especially if it's a job that you really want, call someone, call the hiring manager, call the department head and say, listen, I may not have every skill that you listed, but I really want to do this. Because having that phone conversation is gonna set you apart because they're getting, I mean, for every job we post, we probably get 200 or 300 resumes. So being able to filter through and no phone calls, your generation doesn't call us. You know, so that's one way you can set yourself apart already. And if it's not listed, just call the company and say, I want to talk to the supervisor of this position because I have some questions. I would like some more information, right?
Great. Sorry, what do you think was the best resource that you had here at UNT that we should take advantage of?
I think you just heard it. Like the internship opportunities are so invaluable. The chance to go and work in the governor's office or at the legislature or in the local courthouses, asking professors to connect you with folks who are graduates in the field that you want to go to. I've heard a couple of folks here say, and this is probably something that we can do a better job of, is reaching out to mentor some of you. If they want to work in the nonprofit sector, I'd be happy to take a phone call or do a Zoom call, or if you want to come to Charleston, please do. It's great. Come spend a day.
Yeah.
Mr. Stancil, I actually have a question for you. So I was reading through your resume and I saw that you were executive counsel for a while. Is that correct?
Yeah, I was assistant executive counsel technically for 2 years. So that was my first legal position. Isn't that funny?
Yes, sir. Did you enjoy that? I actually had an internship at the governor's office last semester, and one of the best parts of everything that I learned was learning from the governor's executive council just about day to day. He said it's probably the most stressful job he's ever had, just that he's working constantly. And I just wanted to hear from your experience, from then, how it was.
I thought it was wonderful, but I drank a lot. Levity aside, especially during the legislative sessions, because I would come in before the sun would rise. I would go home after the sun set. In fact, my wife at that time was a basketball coach, and there was 1 2-week period. The only time I saw her was on the gym floor. So it can be stressful, but it is rewarding. I got to read every little piece of legislation introduced. We didn't have computers back in those days. I typed synopses. I had 4 secretaries that would take my dictation. And then as each bill was amended in committee, I had to track that change. I then had to go to the governor and the floor leaders the next day for us to decide what we're going to support, what we're going to oppose, what we're going to act like we've never heard. So we would put that strategy in place. I had an intern as well, and I put them to work constantly because you can't be in all committees at all times. So you have to divvy the work up, do the best job you can. Those are the most meaningful and important positions in government. So I'm glad you enjoyed your internship. Hopefully you'll go back, and one day you may go back to the big office. Nothing wrong with having a woman as governor. You could be our first.
That's sweet. Thank you.
Okay, one last question. Yeah.
Just, pardon, so you mentioned in your work with youth development, there's a lot of overlap with trafficking with minors. My name is Leanna Stovall. I work with Wilson Living in Atlanta. And so it's my understanding 80% of victims are actually re-exploited because the rehabilitation method is just not there. What would you say is the greatest need in child rehabilitation after being exploited?
The truth, we heard this earlier. Money, it's money, right? So everyone knows it's a problem. No one wants to invest in a solution. Because when you talk about trafficking, and this is something that I've been asking our state legislature for a while to pay attention to, we actually have had, I take care of kids in foster care is what my job is supposed to be. But in about the past 3 years, we've seen a huge influx of youth who have been trafficked, youth who are being targeted for trafficking. And the programs are so complicated and they're so few and far between. Devereaux in Florida will take a child who's been trafficked, remove them a state or 2 away from home. They will isolate them. They will take all their devices. Hopefully, their point is to break the contact with the trafficker. But what you have to also do is break the reason that trafficker connected. Does that make sense? And then you have to backfill lessons that kids can't tell you they missed. You have to provide nurturing that kids can't tell you that they need. Like, it's a complicated thing, but the states don't want to pay for it. You know, our communities don't want to pay for it. So who pays for it? No one. So what do is we do the cheapest thing possible, and you keep passing these kids around, and the traffickers keep re-engaging in laws. I had a young lady in our care 2 years ago who came out of the trafficking program in Florida on a Thursday evening. All right. She had been in that program for 2.5 years. 2.5 years. She was removed and isolated in order to break the pattern and heal her, quote unquote. All right. Within 24 hours, the trafficker from 2.5 years before was back in touch, and she was grooming other kids to run away with them. Nothing changed, right? So the programming can't be isolation. That can't be the solution, right? And this is where we have to be creative and innovate and really think about how to do something different. But there's so much fear around it because it's hard. And those bad guys have guns and knives, right? They're scary and they do serious damage to our children. And then the question becomes, and I talked about this earlier with one of your classmates, you know, the question becomes, is the child then the perpetrator? Is the victim becoming the perpetrator? And how do you handle that situation? Because it's complicated. So there's a lot of work to be done around trafficking.
Thank you so much. And I know you guys have to go off to your other class, but please give a round of applause